The desert wind came screaming out of nowhere that night, slamming against Jake Sullivan's barn like it meant to tear the whole place apart. The sky was black and swollen with storm clouds, lightning flashing so bright it made the red earth glow like fire for a split second at a time. Jake had seen storms before. He had buried family after storms. But this one felt different, like something more than weather was riding in with it. Jake was 32 years old and already carried more loss than most men twice his age. His ranch sat alone on the edge of Breen Ridge County, dry land stretching for miles in every direction. 20 head of cattle, a dozen horses, a barn that leaned slightly east from years of wind, and a small wooden house that once held laughter. Now it held silence. 3 winters ago, a cholera had taken his father and younger brother. His mother followed soon after, her heart too broken to keep beating. Jake buried them himself under 3 wooden crosses behind the house. Since then, he kept to himself, worked, ate, slept, survived. Nothing more. That night, as thunder cracked overhead, he hurried into the barn to secure the horses. His black stallion, Midnight, pawed nervously at the ground. "Easy," Jake muttered, running his hand down the animal's neck. "Just weather." But it wasn't just weather. The barn doors suddenly burst open under the force of the wind. Rain came in sideways, drenching everything. And in the doorway stood 3 figures. Women. They stumbled inside, soaked to the bone. Mud clung to their dresses. Their hair hung heavy and wet against their faces. Jake's hand dropped instantly to the Colt .45 at his hip. The eldest stepped forward first. She looked to be in her late 20s, dark hair plastered to her head, green eyes sharp and alert, despite the exhaustion written across her face. She positioned herself slightly ahead of the other 2 like a shield. "We need shelter," she said, her voice steady even as her teeth chattered. "Just until the storm passes." Behind her stood the second sister, maybe 25, auburn curls wild and tangled. There was something fierce in her eyes, something untamed. The youngest clung to her arm, barely 20, pale, frightened. Her hands trembled. Jake studied them carefully. Torn hems, mud stains, scraped knuckles on the eldest sister's hands. Not the marks of travelers caught in a storm. The marks of women who had been running. Oh, he could have turned them away. This land was not kind to strangers, but his father had once told him something he never forgot. "Out here, you don't let people die at your door." "There's hay in the loft," Jake said finally. "Dry up there. You can wait out the storm." Relief flashed across the eldest sister's face, but only for a second. She nodded once. "Thank you." Jake grabbed blankets from the house and returned with food. Bread, dried beef. He set it down without getting too close. "You can eat," he said firmly when they hesitated. The auburn-haired sister looked up at him then, eyes sharp. "Think you can handle us all?" she asked suddenly. There was challenge in her voice, almost a dare. Jake felt heat rise in his neck, but kept his tone calm. "I reckon I can manage." Thunder shook the barn again, and the youngest sister flinched. "You can stay the night," Jake added. "Storm won't clear before morning." The eldest nodded slowly. "We'll be gone at first light." Jake didn't argue. He knew a lie when he heard one. That night, he sat by his window with a rifle across his lap, watching the barn through sheets of rain. Something about those women unsettled him. Not fear. Something deeper. By morning, the storm had passed. Jake stepped outside into thick red mud. The barn still stood. That was what mattered. Inside, he found the sisters already awake. They were calming the horses. The eldest brushed down a nervous mare with practiced hands. The auburn-haired one cleaned stalls like she'd done it her whole life. The youngest carried feed carefully, whispering softly to the animals. "You know horses," Jake observed. "Oh, we grew up around them," the eldest answered. They worked together in silence, and for the first time in 3 years, Jake's ranch didn't feel empty. By midday, he made them an offer. "Storm did damage. I could use help fixing things. 3 days' work, food and board." The eldest hesitated. The sisters exchanged glances. 3 days, she agreed at last. 3 days. That afternoon, they moved into his parents' old room. The house felt different with voices in it, laughter from the kitchen, soft humming while food cooked. The youngest found his small stack of books and smiled like she had discovered treasure. That night, Jake couldn't sleep again. He stepped quietly toward the barn and sat near the door, not meaning to listen, but hearing them anyway. "We can't keep running forever," the auburn-haired one said. He'll find us," the eldest replied. "He always does." The name Morrison slipped into the night air like a curse. Jake stiffened. "Morrison killed her," the youngest whispered. "I saw it." Silence followed, heavy and thick. Jake's boot scraped against wood. Instantly, the barn door flew open. The eldest stood there holding a Remington pistol steady in her hand. "How long were you listening?" she demanded. "Long enough," Jake answered quietly. And in that moment, as lightning flashed again across the horizon, Jake realized something. These women were not just running from a storm. They were running from a man powerful enough to send death riding after them. And for reasons he didn't yet understand, Jake Sullivan had already decided he would stand in its path. The moon hung high over the ranch, and silver light washing over the barn and casting long shadows across the red earth. Jake stood in front of the sisters, the night air cool against his skin, the weight of what he had just heard settling deep in his chest. "Morrison killed your mother," he said quietly. Margaret did not deny it. The fire in her green eyes dimmed for a moment, replaced by something older. Grief, rage, exhaustion. "He beat her," Rose said flatly. "When she refused him, and when she kept fighting, he finished it." Catherine's voice trembled, but she did not look away. "He told us we belonged to him next." The words hung between them like smoke. Jake had known cruel men. The frontier bred them, men who thought land and money meant ownership of everything. But this was something darker, something that did not end with one grave. "And now he's hunting you," Jake said. "For 5 months," Margaret replied. "Every town we stop in, his men show up. We don't stay long enough to rest. We don't stay long enough to breathe." Rose lifted her chin. "We're done running." Jake looked at the 3 of them, mud on their dresses, bruises on their arms, fear buried under defiance. They had already fought more than most men ever would. "You can stay," he said. Margaret's head snapped up. "You don't understand what you're inviting into your life." "I understand enough." He did not speak loudly. He did not need to. "If Morrison comes here," Jake continued, "he won't find you alone." The wind moved through the sagebrush behind him. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Rose stepped closer, studying him like she was trying to decide whether he was brave or foolish. "I think you can handle us all?" she asked again, softer this time. Jake met her gaze. "Yes." They stood there for a long moment. Then Margaret lowered her pistol. Inside the house, they talked until the oil lamp burned low. Morrison owned half of Breen Ridge County. He had judges in his pocket, deputies on his payroll, men who would burn down homes for a few dollars, and a promise of favor. "He doesn't lose," Margaret said. "He destroys." Jake leaned back in his chair. Every man loses eventually. The next morning they prepared. Jake showed them where he kept his rifles. Rose handled a Winchester like she had grown up with it. Margaret checked ammunition carefully, counting each bullet twice. Catherine's hands shook at first, but she steadied them. "You ever shoot at a man?" Jake asked quietly. Rose's eyes darkened. Yes." There were no more questions after that. By noon, the dust cloud appeared. 5 riders. Jake saw them first from the roof of the barn, where he was repairing shingles. He climbed down fast. "Company!" he called. The sisters moved without panic. Margaret positioned herself by the house. Rose slipped into the barn loft for a higher view. Catherine stayed near the doorway, shotgun ready. Jake stepped onto the porch as the riders reached the gate. The man in front had cold eyes and a scar running along his jaw. He did not smile. "Afternoon," the man said. "Name's Garrett. We're looking for 3 women. Sisters. Thieves." Jake rested his rifle casually in his arms. "Lots of folks pass through," he said. "Don't keep count." Garrett's gaze shifted toward the house. "Old Perkins swears he saw 3 women riding this way during that storm." "Perkins swears a lot of things," Jake replied. The air tightened. Then the front door opened. Margaret stepped out beside Jake, her posture calm and steady. "These men bothering you, husband?" she asked clearly. Jake did not hesitate. "Just passing through, dear." Garrett's eyes narrowed. Rose appeared next, wiping her hands on an apron like she had been cooking all morning. "We having guests for supper?" she asked sweetly. Catherine's voice floated from inside the house, singing softly. A hymn, gentle and pure. The riders looked confused. This was not what they expected. Garrett shifted in his saddle. "You been here long, ma'am?" Margaret's expression turned cool. "Long enough to know we don't entertain strangers who question my family." "Family," but the word settled heavy in Jake's chest. Garrett stared for another moment, then tipped his hat mockingly. "We'll be around," he said. "Morrison doesn't forget." They rode off, but not far. Jake watched them disappear over the ridge. "They'll be back," Margaret said. "I know." That night, they did not sleep. Jake saw movement first. Shadows sliding toward the barn. More than 5 this time. "Positions," he whispered. The first shot shattered the silence. Jake fired through the window just as a man rushed the door. The gunfight exploded in all directions. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. Horses screamed in the barn. Rose fired from above with deadly accuracy. Margaret moved from window to window like a ghost. Catherine's shotgun roared beside Jake, her face pale but determined. Men fell in the yard. The attackers had expected easy prey. They found a fortress. After what felt like forever, the surviving riders fled into the darkness. Silence returned slowly, broken only by heavy breathing and the distant thunder of retreating horses. Jake stepped outside, scanning the yard. Bodies lay in the dirt. Morrison had made his move. And this was only the beginning. Margaret stood beside him, her hands steady despite the smoke drifting through the air. "He'll come himself next time," she said. Jake nodded. "Good," he answered quietly. Rose stepped out behind them, wiping blood from her cheek, not her own. "Think you can handle what's coming?" she asked. Jake looked at the 3 sisters. Brave, fierce, tired of running. He tightened his grip on his rifle. "Together," he said. We can handle anything." The desert felt too quiet the next morning. No wind, no birds. Even the horses seemed restless, shifting in their stalls like they sensed what was coming. Jake stood on the porch at sunrise, rifle in hand, eyes locked on the northern ridge. He had counted the bodies from the night before. Morrison had lost good men. That kind of man did not forgive losses. He answered them with force. Behind him, the sisters moved through the house with calm purpose. Margaret loaded ammunition with steady hands. Rose wrapped fresh cloth around a cut on her arm and checked her rifle again. Catherine stood at the window, breathing slow, steady, the shotgun resting against her shoulder. They were no longer running women. They were defenders. Just before noon, the dust cloud appeared. Not 5 riders this time. Not 10, but nearly 40. They spread across the ridge like a dark wave, horses glinting under the hard sun. At the center rode Harrison Morrison himself, tall, broad, dressed in fine black, sitting a stallion like he owned the very land beneath it. "He came," Catherine whispered. "Yes," Jake said. "He did." The riders advanced slowly, surrounding the ranch from 3 sides. No rush, no panic. They believed numbers alone would win this. Morrison rode forward, stopping just outside rifle range. "Sullivan," he shouted, "send the women out and I'll let you live." Jake stepped off the porch, boots crunching in the dirt. "They're not leaving," he replied. Morrison's eyes darkened when he saw Margaret standing beside Jake. Rose visible in the barn loft. Catherine at the window. "You think you can protect them?" Morrison sneered. "Would you're one rancher against an army." Jake did not raise his voice. "I'm not alone." Morrison laughed. A cold, ugly sound. "They belong to me," he shouted. "Their father owed me. Their land was mine. Their mother should have known better." The shot came from the house. Catherine fired into the dirt inches from Morrison's horse. The stallion reared violently. "You will not speak of her," Catherine said, her voice clear and steady. Morrison regained control, fury twisting his face. "Burn it!" he ordered. The attack began. Gunfire tore through the quiet air. Morrison's men charged from all sides, bullets ripping into wood and splintering fence posts. Jake fired with calm precision. One rider fell, then another. Rose shot from the loft, picking targets with fierce focus. But Margaret moved through the house like she had memorized every shadow. Men dropped before they even reached the porch, but there were too many. The barn door burst open under impact. Jake sprinted toward it, firing as he ran. Inside, chaos exploded. Close quarters, smoke, shouts, horses screaming. Rose fought beside him, her rifle empty, swinging it like a club when a man got too close. "They're flanking the house!" Margaret shouted. Jake felt the pressure closing in. 40 against 4 could not hold forever. Then, from the southern road, came another sound. Hoofbeats. Many hoofbeats. Sheriff Thompson rode hard at the front of 20 deputies, rifles raised. "For the law!" the sheriff roared. Morrison's men froze in confusion as gunfire erupted from behind them. They were caught between 2 forces. The tide turned fast. When men dropped their weapons, some tried to flee, others fell where they stood. Jake emerged from the barn just in time to see Morrison attempting to escape. His stallion turned sharply toward the ridge. Catherine stepped forward. The shotgun rested steady in her hands. "For our mother," she said. She fired. The horse collapsed, throwing Morrison hard into the dirt. His leg twisted beneath him as deputies surrounded him with rifles drawn. Sheriff Thompson dismounted slowly. "Harrison Morrison," he said coldly. "You're under arrest for murder and conspiracy." Morrison screamed curses, but his empire had just fallen in the dust. Silence settled across the ranch. Smoke drifted upward into the clear sky. Jake turned slowly, scanning for the sisters. Margaret stood unharmed. Catherine trembled, but remained upright. Rose leaned against the barn, blood on her sleeve. Jake rushed to her. "It's nothing," she insisted through clenched teeth, but the bullet had grazed her arm. Doc Harmon worked quickly, bandaging her while the deputies gathered prisoners. As the sun began to set, the sheriff approached Jake. "It's over," he said. "His men will testify. Too many witnesses now." Jake nodded. Morrison was taken away in chains. Weeks later, the courthouse in Millfield filled to capacity. The sisters testified. Catherine's journal exposed every crime. Other families stepped forward with their stories. The jury did not take long. Guilty. When the gallows were built and Morrison stood beneath the rope, he looked toward the sisters one last time. They did not look away. The trap door opened, and Greenridge County exhaled. Months passed. The ranch bore scars from battle, but it stood stronger. New boards replaced shattered ones. Fresh paint covered bullet holes. Rose's arm healed. She began training horses full-time. Margaret expanded the ranch business with smart, steady decisions. Catherine opened a small school in town, her quiet strength guiding children who had grown up under fear. Jake no longer stood alone at the fence at sunset. He stood beside Rose. One evening, as the sky turned gold, she looked at him with that same spark in her eyes. "Think you can handle me?" she teased softly. Jake smiled. "For the rest of my life." The desert wind no longer carried fear. It carried laughter. The barn that once held strangers during a storm now held family. The house, once filled with silence, now rang with voices. 3 sisters had arrived, hunted and broken, and they stayed loved and free. And Jake Sullivan, the lonely cowboy who once guarded only memories, now guarded something far greater. A home worth fighting for, a future worth living, and a family he would protect until his last breath.